San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, from a shutdown to a slowdown, how the U.S. government shutdown could delay the most highly anticipated tech IPOs in 2019. Plus, cracking down on tech theft. The U.S. government is using new legal tactics to take on China. And could Elon Musk be the voice of reason in U.S.-China relations? We will bring you the latest out of the Tesla CEO's meeting with the Chinese premier, Li Keqiang. But first to our top story, 2019, supposed to be the year of big new tech IPOs. Uber, Lyft, Palantir, maybe Slack or more. But with the U.S. government shutdown hitting its 19th day, the U.S. IPO market could be facing a slowdown. The SEC is one of several federal agencies down to a skeleton staff. So just how much of a delay are we talking about? To answer that, we've got Bloomberg's managing editor for U.S. Deals, Elizabeth Fournier, in New York. So, Elizabeth, just how bad is this situation at the SEC?
Well, if you think back to the end of last year, we were sitting right here and we were talking, very excitedly about how 2019 could be this huge banner year for big IPOs, particularly these big tech IPOs. And we knew that, Uber and Lyft had both confidentially filed with the SEC. And what this shutdown means is that none of that paperwork is getting looked at. So companies can still, put in their basic filings, but with all the staff furloughed, there's no one to review them, no one to give feedback to the companies, no one to communicate, what else might be needed before they move on to the next step.
Now, Dara Khosrowshahi, the CEO of Uber, told the Wall Street Journal that the Uber IPO is still on track. Mm-hmm. That said, even if the government resumes operations, couldn't there still be a delay?
Yeah, absolutely. They're going to have a huge backlog of paperwork that they're working with. But the date we're really focusing on here is February the 14th, because after that date, it's required for companies to provide a new audit for their numbers for 2018. So usually what we'll see in January is lots of companies announcing IPOs to get ahead of that date and trying to price them before then so they don't have to update all their financial numbers. So between now and then, if things don't clear up over the next couple of days or weeks, or even if they do, there could still be a backlog that sort of pushes us into that next period of financial reporting for companies.
And what about M&A? There are several pending deals involving foreign companies. Mm-hmm. What happens there?
So we've already seen a few companies actually kind of communicate with investors about what happens next, just saying things like, this could slow down our regulatory approval, it could slow down when we can hold a shareholder vote. So people aren't sounding the alarm yet, but I think if you're waiting for something like an approval from one of the US antitrust things, or maybe if you're a drug company waiting for one of those big FDA approvals to come through before you start maybe trying to sell yourself, then there could be a slowdown there.
All right, Elizabeth Fournier, thanks so much for weighing in. Of course, we are watching every day in Washington. I want to continue this discussion with Alex Tosig and Mercy Victoria Grace, partners at Lightspeed Venture Partners. Of the 300-plus companies that Lightspeed has partnered with since the firm's founding, 1/3 have gone public or been acquired. Snap, of course, was one of your more high-profile exits recently. Thank you so much for joining us. Are you worried about the impact of the shutdown on the current market in Silicon Valley companies?
Well, I'll say, first of all, thanks for having us. I'll certainly say the SEC being shut down is not good. It is not good for business. The IPO market is a crucial end stage for many companies that want to build standalone sustainable businesses. And we think it's really important for companies to really aim for that in the long term. And frankly, this was so abrupt that a lot of companies were anticipating that that would be an option for them. And when that happens, then they plan their business to spend capital and hire people. And they depend on the proceeds of that IPO to continue to fund the business. Now, the good news is, at Lightspeed, we manage over $6 billion in capital. For a firm like us, we have a backstop for some of our companies that are at that stage, so they can continue to stay private for longer. But these companies will need to find other options and ways to fund their businesses unless they're, happen to be already profitable if they were planning on an IPO.
Now, you do have a few unrealized unicorns. So, Rubrik, Affirm, Netscope, Trip Actions. Are any of your companies seeing an impact already?
We can't. We obviously can't comment on whether these companies are going to go public anytime soon. But I think that the nice thing about being at a firm where we do have ample capital is we can support these companies regardless of what the liquidity situation looks like. And all these companies that you mentioned, they're all trying to build sustainable businesses. So I don't think that they have all of them have a backup plan given any sort of scenario that we're going to go into in the economy in 2019. And a lot of our companies, frankly, have put that together given all the uncertainty that we've seen coming out of the government.
Mercy, you ran growth at Slack before joining Lightspeed. No, you're not going to share any inside information with us, but Slack is one of the companies that we keep hearing about potentially going public this year. Stuart has talked about it. You know, what is the impact on employees of a potential delay like this?
No, I can't really comment on exactly what that impact would be because so much is unknown. And frankly, I haven't been there for a long time. While there, I ran growth for about 3 years. And so what I'm really excited about in joining Lightspeed is the opportunity to bring that understanding to other companies and the next generation of unicorns.
So we're going to talk about that. But is the funding environment being impacted by the uncertainty in Washington, the trade war?
Well,
now these delays.
Yeah, I think there's a certain amount of certainty that the markets like. They like to have the predictability of knowing what's going to happen. And when the markets get very volatile like this, whether they're in reaction to regulatory stuff or their reaction to trade stuff, it's just not good for, in general, the sort of capital cycle. And I will say there's been a lot more conversations around the boardroom tables in a lot of our companies around how we plan for a contraction in the market. But it's still in the stages of planning. It's not really, we haven't really seen it affect the businesses, at least the ones that I've been involved with, that much.
Now, at the end of last year, Lightspeed announced 5 new partners, 3 of them women. It was like a bomb dropping, and I was like, yes, one of them is you.
Yeah.
Mercy, why did you decide to join Lightspeed? And, you know, what is your focus?
So my focus is on investing in the future of work, which is probably not surprising for someone who ran growth at Slack. And in 2015, I started an organization called Women in Product that's since spawned out a couple of other organizations and become really a global movement. And I started that organization because in my 12 years of working at early stage startups, I had worked with one other female product manager. And now I'm joining Lightspeed, and about 25% of the investing partners are women. So I think there's been this big shift already.
So how many women at Lightspeed now have check writing privileges?
Is it
7? We have 5 investment professionals on the team at various stages in their careers, and it's been really amazing to see all these really talented people join all within the last 3 years. It's been an incredible transformation. So my partner Jana Messerschmidt joined around I think the same month you joined.
Yeah.
Nicole Quinn's been here for a while. Ashley Brazer and Natalie Liu all came on in the last couple of years.
Yeah. So, you know, what trends are you looking at in terms of, you know, what's exciting, but what's also, you know, overhyped and not exciting?
Well, I can tell you where I'm spending my time. I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of years trying to think about what's going to happen to the retail landscape in the age of Amazon, and where technology can continue to sustain businesses in areas that are not traditionally covered by Amazon. And you know, we like to think about this retail apocalypse that people talk about as being a bit overhyped, maybe to your point. There's certainly certain categories of retail that are more affected, department stores, for example. But there's other areas where we're seeing a resurgence. And a great example of that is in the independent retail category. So we backed a company called Faire. It's F-A-I-R-E, spelled like the French word. And they raised $100 million from us and a few other firms last year. And they are building a wholesale marketplace between artisanal brands and independent retailers. So there's about 1 million of these retailers around the country. And they do about $1 trillion of gross merchandise value amongst all of them. So they're all very tiny, but they're economically a very powerful force. And Faire is giving them the ability to buy inventory risklessly. So to test out new products in their stores and grow their product offering. So we think independent retail, just traditionally because these businesses are small and have small balance sheets, haven't had access to all the powerful tools that the larger firms have had. And they have the added benefit of being local in their communities with great customer service and great curated selection. So we think that's a resurgent category of retail. So while the big boxes might be suffering, they're actually doing quite well.
Mercy, what's next in the future of work? What's the next Slack?
Yeah, so I think that the next Slack we may actually find in blue-collar or pink-collar industries. There's a huge number of businesses that are still run actually on pen and paper, and there are a lot of businesses that are relatively blind to the risks facing them in the global supply chain. So I think that the consumerization of enterprise is something that maybe we're tired of talking about in Silicon Valley, but once we're tired of talking about something here, it has often barely started to touch real global business.
All right, Mercy Victoria Grace, Alex Tosig, Lightspeed Venture Partners, thanks so much for stopping by. We'll be watching. Coming up, Jeff and Mackenzie Bezos have announced they are divorcing. What does it mean for his stakes in Amazon, Blue Origin, The Washington Post, and could she become the world's richest woman? And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio, listen on the Bloomberg app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. The richest person in the world is getting a divorce. Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos announced on Twitter that he and his wife Mackenzie have decided to split up after 25 years. Mackenzie played a significant role at the company in the early years and was, quote, there when he wrote the business plan. According to the Bloomberg Billionaires Index, Bezos is worth more than $137 billion. If the couple split their fortune equally, it could leave Mackenzie with $69 billion, making her the world's richest woman. I want to dig into whether this split has any implications for the companies that Bezos runs. Here with us, Bloomberg's Anders Melin, who is part of Bloomberg's wealth team. Also with us, Bloomberg Tech Senior Executive Editor Brad Stone, who wrote the book on Amazon. And, you know, as I mentioned, Mackenzie was very involved in the early days of the company. Tell us about their history.
Yeah, well, they met at D.E. Shaw, the Wall Street hedge fund. I believe she worked with Jeff when they met. They got married. She helped Jeff decide to become an entrepreneur, that legendary drive to the Northwest to Seattle where he was writing the business plan. And in those early years, I mean, she really, maybe not formally, but she did work at Amazon. She kept the books. She would help drive packages to the post office, and she would interview. Like, I remember an early employee saying that Jeff, he was friendly with Jeff. Jeff didn't want to hire him because he thought he was playing too much ultimate frisbee, and Mackenzie convinced him that it was sort of okay to bring him aboard. So she played a key role in those early years. Of course, not really over the last 2 decades. Certainly in that first chapter.
Now, obviously, Bloomberg keeps great records on the wealth of the wealthiest individuals. So if you go to Rich Go on the Bloomberg, you can see the list of the world's wealthiest people. And there's a chart here that gives us a different, more visual view. Anders, there's a possible settlement underway. We have no idea how the fortunes will ultimately be divided. But under Washington state law, is it true that she's entitled to half of everything he owns, including a stake in Amazon, which is 16%?
So what we know so far is that the Washington state law is set up to divide things quite equitably between spouses when it comes to property that is acquired or attained during a marriage. How this is actually going to play out, though, is we'll essentially have to see. There could be a prenup that's in place. If that's the case, then obviously they've already decided what's going to happen. And also this law that things should be split equitably or equally only applies if there's no agreement already in place. And we've seen in prior divorces when there have been couples that are worth quite a bit of money, that there's many ways you can slice and dice fortunes that are that large.
So, Brad, Bezos also owns a couple of other companies, Blue Origin, The Washington Post. You know, this presumably impacts all of this, right? Because his interests over the years have changed.
It does, but I think we have to take their statement at face value, you know, that they continue to be partners as parents in future initiatives going forward, like their philanthropy. You know, I see this as probably an amicable and very mature separation. It's also, you know, true that if this were a different company, if, say, the activist shareholders were circling and there was a question of kind of control, that this would be a bigger deal. But it's Amazon. It's the most respected and admired company in the world, and you don't even hear activist shareholder being in the same breath as the company or its leadership. So, you know, I don't see any potential dilution of his control as being significant.
Right, and I do want to emphasize, they say they will continue to live their lives as friends. If they could do it all over again, they would. That said, we can't avoid the conversations about the wealth. So, Anders, you know, is it possible that if, you know, depending on how this shakes out, she could become the world's richest woman?
She could. The stake right now, or Bezos' net worth right now, is about $137 billion, split in half. That's about $69 billion that they would each end up with. And that would put her ahead of François Bettencourt of L'Oreal and Alice Walton, and would make her the world's richest woman.
What is is the sort of precedent here with past billionaire breakups?
So we've seen things go both ways. For example, Sergey Brin at Alphabet divorced in 2015, kept all his shares in the company then. Larry Ellison of Oracle has been divorced several times and still has his stake in Oracle. On the other side of the coin, there is Steve Wynn, who split seemingly amicable with Elaine, but then things turned sour around 2011 when Steve got remarried, and they eventually ended up in court. Then there's also oil billionaire Harold Hamm, who went through a rather nasty divorce proceeding in court with his wife and ended up cutting her a $972 million check. But while in court, he was fighting to keep an even bigger share of the roughly $17 billion fortune.
And, then of course there's the question of what she would do with her, newly independent wealth. Brad, Lorraine Powell Jobs has become quite a force in philanthropic investing and also for-profit investing at Emerson Collective, which now has like hundreds of employees. What do you imagine that she will do?
I don't think we know enough to say. I mean, right now, she's an accomplished novelist. She's written 2 well-received books. She runs an anti-bullying organization. But, she's been a private person for the last decade or two. We haven't heard much from her. Occasionally we have.
Right. She's actually talked about how she doesn't love, social gatherings and,
right.
many small conversations, which you imagine she would have been subjected to as the
Oh, yes. And she gave one interview, I remember, to Vogue magazine before one of her books came out. But she's been a private person, so we really don't know, other than what they said in their statement, which is that they'll continue to be partners in some of these other philanthropic initiatives.
All right. Well, we'll continue to watch this. Our senior executive editor, Brad Stone, and Anders Mellon of our Wealth Group, thank you so much. Coming up, we speak to the Seattle-based hospital group that is planning a digital future for its patients. And we're live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology and follow our global breaking news network TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg. America's third largest health system is looking to technology to lower cost for patients and improve care. Providence St. Joseph Health is starting a second venture fund to invest in startups that can directly help its digital strategy and, in turn, patients. CEO Rod Hochman spoke exclusively to Bloomberg's Taylor Riggs at the J.P. Morgan Healthcare Conference in San Francisco and explained where the money is going.
We had the first fund for $150 million, and that was so successful, we went and said we're going to open a second fund at $150 million. Along the same lines, digital consumer solutions, top of the list in terms of our interface with our patients and our consumers that are out there. And companies, our criteria is always to look for companies that we want to use ourselves. So we don't look at companies that we say, well, this isn't for us. So generally, they're things that we use ourselves, and we also want to invest in and be part of. So,
how much more money do you want to raise this year or in the next 2 to 3 years to get you to where you want to be?
So we planned at $150 million. So we're ready. We have the initial $150 million committed, and now we're going to have the additional $150 million for a total of $300.
The theme of this conference has really been all about the consumer and consumerism. On your end, what are you doing to help lower the cost for the consumer, create a better experience for the consumer?
So for us, it's been all about consumer. Obviously, our headquarters is in Seattle. We're in Amazon country, and if anyone knows the consumer, it's Amazon. And we've just hired a bunch of their people. Aaron Martin heads up our digital solutions, and his whole focus for us is how do we make things easier for the consumer? Digital solutions, flow, all the ways that consumers can access us online. And we also want to meet our consumers where they are. They don't need to come into our office. We're getting them online, telehealth visits. So we really look at consumerism as kind of the next wave for us to kind of meet our patients where they want to be cared for.
You've mentioned digital a few times, so talk to me more about your digital strategy and some of the digital and technology disruptions that will drive the change in your business.
Right. So I think consumers want to go on their iPhone, they want to schedule their own appointments, they want to pick their own doctors, they want to come in when they want to, where they want to, they want their information online. So we invested in a company called Zelf. What Zelf does is it allows you for a doctor to click and put an application into your medical record so you can use it. So that to us really facilitates that communication between the clinician and the patient, but also lets the patient determine what they want, when they want it, and where they want to be.
How are you planning for any change or repeal of the Affordable Care Act?
So we've already kind of put that into our financial plans for the future, and I think that's already accounted for. I think the big issue for us on the provider side is more about where 340B is going, pharmacy costs, and what the 340B program is going to do. And I'd say the other big variable for the provider community is not as much ACA as what the states are going to do with Medicaid.
Finally, talk to me about consolidation. We've seen mega mergers at 2018 and a few starting off in 2019 versus some of these smaller bolt-on acquisitions. How do you view M&A in 2019 in your space?
So I think if 2018 was the year of consolidation, we look at 2019 as the year of coalition. So last year we had the first Civica RX where you've got Intermountain, Providence St. Joseph Health, you've got HCA all coming together to kind of form a generic drug company. So I think we're going to see more of those kind of combinations where you don't have to go through all the pain and regulatory environment of a total consolidation, but you can still get at specific purposes. So things around Medicaid, programs around Medicare Advantage, around pharmacy are going to be the things that we're going to see. I will make a prediction, I'll go out on a limb, that we're not going to see as many of the mega consolidations. We'll still see some smaller ones, but not of the same scale that we saw in 2018.
That was Providence St. Joseph Health CEO Rod Hochman with Bloomberg's Taylor Riggs at the J.P. Morgan Healthcare Conference. Coming up, Apple gets a bit of relief as Morgan Stanley gives it a boost of confidence. What does the bank see in the iPhone maker in the midst of a first quarter forecast cut? We'll discuss. Plus, Google is coming after Alexa with upgrades to its own virtual assistant. Google's Vice President of Search and Assistant, Nick Fox, joins us from CES to discuss what's new. This is Bloomberg. Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. And we are calling it iPhone. Those iconic words were uttered by Steve Jobs 12 years ago this Wednesday to introduce the world to Apple's now flagship product, the iPhone. Since Jobs introduced what is now the most recognizable smartphone on the planet, Apple has sold over 1 billion iPhones. And last year, Apple became the first publicly traded U.S. company to hit a $1 trillion market cap. Now, since those highs, it's been a bumpy ride for Apple as the company recently cut its first quarter forecast. But Morgan Stanley just gave Apple a positive endorsement. Analyst Katie Huberty said a slowdown in services revenue last quarter looks, quote, temporary in nature and mostly related to Apple Care. Apple rose in early Wednesday trading, adding to gains Tuesday. To discuss, I want to bring in via phone from Kansas City, Missouri, Wedbush Managing Director Dan Ives, who currently has an outperform on the company. So, Dan, do you see the positives, too?
Yeah, look, I continue to view this. This is an install-based story. 750 million iPhones active, and we have 350 million of those in upgrade opportunity over the next 12 to 18 months. This has been a dark 2 to 4 quarters But ultimately, I think Apple is going to emerge from this with a specific focus on the services business. And that fundamentally speaks to our bull thesis that they're going to emerge from this with a focus on services and price cuts with China front and center.
That said, Samsung also reporting disappointing news this week. Sales down, especially in the chip business, but also in the smartphone business. They don't specifically mention China, but talk about a broader macroeconomic slowdown. Perhaps this isn't just China related. This is industry-wide. And, could that mean longer-term problems for Apple?
It's a good point. At this stage, smartphones continue to be mature. If we see where we are in the cycle, you saw that with Samsung and obviously with Apple's earnings debacle last week. I think right now it's about, can you start to see some growth on iPhones over the next 12 to 18 months? If you see that within an install base that starts to increase, with the focuses on the services business, which we think on a sum of the parts, the services business alone is worth $400 to $450 billion. That's why you're bullish on Apple here. So right now, this is going to be a pivotal 6 to 9 months ahead for Cook to help get Apple out of what we view as the darkest period in the modern iPhone era for the company.
Can the services business still grow to that point if iPhone sales, let's say, plateau? People are still using iPhones and, buying services for them, but if the actual iPhone market doesn't grow, does it still get to $450 billion, as you say?
Yeah, look, right now it's about, can the install base stay where it is or increase, which we believe that is within the realm of possibilities that we believe is going to be likely. But then it's about putting more services, more content, more subscriptions into that flywheel for Apple. That's going to be the key. It's about monetizing that customer base. Today, we continue to still think that's only about 15% penetrated as you further monetize with more services, which is why we believe a significant content acquisition is going to come down the road as Apple tries to further put, fuel in the tank on the services side.
All right, well, we'll see if Apple continues to respond to some of these more positive reports. Dan Ives, Wedbush Securities, thanks so much always for calling in today. Now, while the latest round of trade talks between China and the U.S. concluded with a cautious sense of optimism, a court case in San Francisco is highlighting a different approach to fighting the stealing of tech secrets by Chinese firms. The Justice Department is using new tactics in its case against 2 Chinese companies as it attempts to safeguard American IP, and one of those new moves is bringing a civil suit against those companies. Here to tell us more, our Bloomberg legal reporter, Joel Rosenblatt. So explain what's happening here.
Stepping back, the big picture is this is a trade secrets, to begin with, an indictment, a criminal prosecution of trade secrets theft against Jinhua, right, a Chinese company that's attempting to manufacture DRAM for China, for the Chinese market, and United Microelectronics Corporation, that's better known as UMC, based in Taiwan. So big picture is this is a criminal prosecution of those 2 companies for trade secret theft from Boise, Idaho-based Micron.
But now there's a civil suit, a new tactic.
Right. So there's, alongside the criminal prosecution, there's a civil suit. This is invoking a provision of the Economic Espionage Act that's been in the law since 1996, but it's the first time it's ever been used.
Wow.
So that's an interesting development. It's unusual, and we're going to kind of see how those 2 work together. Of course, as you mentioned at the outset, it's also in the context of a trade war with China.
So what could the benefit of a civil suit be?
Right. So that's the big question. When I put this to my trade secrets sources and experts, they're scratching their heads trying to figure it out. I've spent months kind of digging, and the answer is this. The civil suit offers some expedience. It offers the ability of the United States to get an order from a court that blocks sales of DRAM chips to the United States much more quickly than the criminal indictment would. That's kind of one piece. The other piece is it's an attempt to kind of layer the suit, to kind of throw different things at these Chinese companies to try something different. The trade secrets theft prosecution has been kind of going on for 3 administrations now. I think this is an attempt to try something just to try to mix it up a little bit.
So the companies were just in court. What happened?
Today was the arraignment, so they were just kind of formally told of what you know, what the indictment contains, the penalties they may face. Both companies entered a not guilty plea, but this by itself is a big difference. It's a big step for prosecutors, because normally even getting to this step has taken a very long time.
So is there any way to say whether this is because of a trade war or because of a new stance on China by the administration?
Well, like I said, this has been going on for at least 3 administrations, this kind of talk tough attitude towards China where trade secrets theft is concerned. Prosecutors, the Justice Department officials will tell you that no, this is something we're doing independent of the White House. It's kind of, you know, it's hard to believe that there's not some coordination between the White House. The Commerce Department has played a serious role in this case, or not in the case, but in the actions against these companies. Prosecutors will tell you, no, this is, you know, trade secret theft. We're prosecuting it on our own, independently.
So could we see more tactics like this, more cases like this coming down the pike?
I think so. I think we're going to see how this one goes, right? This is the first time they've invoked this provision. We're going to see how quickly it moves, whether or not it makes a difference. But I think probably likely to see that.
All right, Joel Rosenblatt, we'll send you back to court. Thank you so much for heading over here to talk to us. Coming up, Google announced a slew of new features for its digital voice assistant at CES this week. How they could help take on Amazon's Alexa next. Plus, we'll take a road trip across Europe in a Tesla. Our experience and recommendations later this hour. This is Bloomberg. Step aside, Alexa. Google Assistant is catching up. At CES Tuesday, Google announced its digital assistant will be available on 1 billion devices by the end of the month. That's double the amount since May and 900 million more devices than claimed by Amazon's Alexa. The company unveiled several new assistant partnerships at the electronics show, including integrations with Sonos speakers, KitchenAid appliances, and Samsung televisions. Google also introduced a new interpreter mode that can translate live conversations between two people speaking different languages. Joining us now from CES in Las Vegas, Google's VP of Search and Assistant, Nick Fox. Nick, thanks so much for joining us. So walk us through how your strategy is different from Amazon.
No, we're really focused on with the Google Assistant is the Assistant being the best way to get things done. People are busy, people have a lot of things going on, and we think the Assistant can be really helpful in if we can get those things done for people, we can give people time back to really focus on what's most important to them. And so we're really focused on 3 environments for the Assistant.
Getting the Assistant everywhere, right?
Well, we think about 3 major environments for the Assistant. We think about the home, we think about the car, and then we think about your phone. And we really want the Assistant to be there for people as they go about their day, and so they can be helpful for them as they go about their daily tasks about their day. And so if you think about it, people are at home in the morning, they're getting ready for their day, they might get in the car for their commute, and then as they're going about their day, they have their phone with them. And so just we want the Assistant to be there with them and available, so that it can be the most helpful for them all day long.
So talk to us about some of the new features, language translation, flight check-in.
Yeah. So maybe I'll start with the home. The home is maybe where the Assistant really got its biggest start with the Google Home and Home Mini. One of the things we're excited about this year is the Smart Clock, which is a device that we worked on with Lenovo, which is really focused on your bedside table, and it's really sort of a nightstand device focused on the morning routine and the evening routine. And so it's a smaller device. It's a 4-inch touchscreen device, and it focuses on the alarm clock functionality, focuses on music and podcasts, and also controlling your smart home. So that's one thing we're very excited about. When it comes to the car, we've brought the Google Assistant into Google Maps. When you think about people driving, a lot of time they're using Google Maps for navigation, and that's the app they have up on their phone. So we've integrated the Assistant directly into Google Maps, both on Android and iOS, and that will be launching. That's actually rolling out this week. So we're really excited about that and making the Assistant more available there. You mentioned translation, which we're also super excited about. This is a new feature called Interpreter Mode. And with Interpreter Mode, you can say, hey, Google, be my French interpreter, or a number of other languages. And then you can just speak in, I can speak in English, and the assistant will speak out in French. Someone else can speak in French, and the assistant will speak out in English. And really, the assistant is being my interpreter right there for me to enable a conversation that I might not have been able to have otherwise. And so that's coming to the Google Home Hub as well as Google Home speakers. So we're really excited about that as well.
So, Amazon had first mover advantage. They also probably have mind share here. What do you think is the biggest advantage that Google has over Amazon?
So in general, with the Google Assistant, we've really been focusing on where Google's strengths are. So that starts with a really deep and strong foundation in AI and machine learning. So if we look at the translation feature that I just talked about, Google's been working on machine translation for many, many, many years, probably more than a decade. And so we're able to do those types of features on the basis of this major investment that we've been making, the sustained investment we've been making over time. We also, as a result of the breadth of the Android ecosystem, as well as the various other ecosystems we have with Chrome and others, we think we can also be more present for users across the devices that they use. So whether it's on their phones, whether it's on the devices in their home, whether it's in their car. And so we've really focused on, as I was saying earlier, bringing the assistant to the devices that matter most to people as they go about their day.
What is the roadmap to monetizing Google Assistant?
At the moment, we're not super focused on monetization. We're really focused on building the right user experience for people and building that out. And that's really the main focus for us. It's still a nascent space, and so we think really nailing and really getting the user experience and the product experience great is what our focus should be at this point in time.
Right, but at a certain point, you're going to have to make money. I mean, do you think about how you can bring ads into people's homes without turning them off?
As I said, we're very careful about that, and we don't want to do things that would be obtrusive or really get in the way. Google's philosophy around advertising has always been that the advertising should be additive to the experience. So, to the extent that we can find ways to do that with the assistant, we might be interested in that. But we don't want to do things that sort of get in the way or feel uncomfortable for users as they bring the assistant into their homes.
So on that note, privacy is, a huge and growing concern, and companies like Google and Facebook have been under fire for how they use customer data. This year could be a pivotal year. You've got, more attention coming from Congress and lawmakers on big tech companies. Are you giving any extra consideration this year about privacy issues and how all of this data that you're gathering in the home in a more private space is being handled?
Yeah, so privacy has always been a major focus for us, and it will continue to be a major focus for us. We realize that people are bringing this device into their home, and it needs to be comfortable. It needs to be something that they would actually like to invite into their home. So with the assistant as an example, we make sure that users are in full control of their data. The assistant only activates when you say the hot word, when you say "Hey Google" or "Okay Google," and so that's the sort of first step from a privacy point of view, is to make sure that it's not listening or it's not activated when you don't want it to. And then when you do actually speak to the assistant, we make sure all of that data is clearly available within your Google account through the privacy settings, and you can remove the data, you can delete the data, and you have full control over it.
Google said that global active users have grown 4 times year over year. Can you give us an idea of the starting point? How many active users there were last year?
We haven't shared that specific number, but even last year, the assistant had already been out for a meaningful period of time. So it's not off of it's off of a meaningful base, and so the 4x increase is even yet more meaningful on top of that already strong starting point. The billion devices that we're at, that we'll be at by the end of the month, is also, I think, a really meaningful point that really gets the ubiquity and the scale of the platform and the product that we built with the assistant as well.
Right, and as I mentioned, 900 million more than the number Amazon gave us for Alexa. Nick Fox, thanks so much for stopping by. Google's Vice President of Search and Google Assistant there. Meantime, Tencent is creating its own digital assistant. The company will soon introduce Xiaowei, a Siri-like virtual assistant for WeChat that'll link to several of Tencent's own services, as well as third-party apps like Meituan Dianping and Didi Chuxing. While assistants from Google and Amazon fight for dominance in the United States, they remain largely non-existent in China, giving a way for local tech giants to move in. It's unclear when Xiaowei will be rolled out. Still ahead, could Elon Musk be the answer to easing tensions between the U.S. and China? Now that its Gigafactory has broken ground in Shanghai, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang seems to think so. We'll discuss next. This is Bloomberg. The U.S. and China tensions are at a standstill over trade. Could Elon Musk be the answer? The Tesla CEO met with Chinese Premier Li Keqiang, and now Li says he hopes Tesla can become a promoter of better ties between their two countries. He also wants Musk to expand the market for electric cars. On Monday, Tesla broke ground on a factory in Shanghai. For more, I want to bring in Bloomberg Businessweek's Max Chafkin. So, Max, this is an interesting new potential role for Elon Musk as diplomatic liaison or attaché of sorts.
Yeah, it's easy to forget, but, right at the beginning of the Trump administration, there was talk, this is going back almost 2 years, there was talk that Elon Musk was sort of the perfect spokesperson for Trumpian, nationalism, because he was making products in the U.S., bringing them to the world. So, that kind of fell apart amid, various controversies, and Musk left one of the business councils, and news kind of overtook that, but we have sort of a callback to that, and there is a if you squint your eyes, there is a way to see Tesla as a bridge between the two countries, because China is trying to bring electric cars, make them a bigger deal in terms of the automotive market, and of course Tesla is a big U.S. manufacturer that's growing. So you never know. On the other hand, there's obviously a lot going on, and we've seen especially in the world of tech, these China stories evolve very quickly. So I'm not sure I put too much stock in it, but certainly something worth watching.
Right, and it's interesting in the context of Tim Cook not being able to accomplish this, at least in the short term, given Apple's recent quarter and sales falling off a cliff in China specifically. So what makes anyone think that Elon Musk could be more successful?
Well, I think we should look at, things that are coming out of the Chinese government, as strategic, right? So I'm not sure that anyone thinks that if Apple can't make a go of it, things will be better for Tesla. On the other hand, for any big tech company, if it wants to grow, especially mature tech companies, and I'd say Tesla is not quite in that category yet, are going to need the Chinese market. So I mean, it's incumbent on Tim Cook and Elon Musk and the founders of every big global company to pay attention to that market. And when there are trade tensions, they're going to be hurt.
Meantime, Larry Ellison joining Tesla's board, revealing a $1 billion stake in Tesla. What kind of attaché is Larry Ellison going to be for Tesla and the rest of the investing world? I
mean, I think any time, a rich guy, especially a successful rich guy, takes a big stake in a company like Tesla, that, you have to view that, as first and foremost, that's a seal of approval. I mean, Larry Ellison and Elon Musk are friends, so, perhaps you could argue that he's, not bringing the, most level-headed thinking to the investment. On the other hand, this is good news for Elon Musk. There is this sort of weirdness, or maybe that's not quite the right word, of the fact that Larry Ellison is the newly added independent director of Tesla, which was part of that SEC settlement. And so there's something a little funny about it. He doesn't seem especially independent. On the other hand, I think Elon will take the win for now.
Right. Certainly a question of just how independent he will be. Bloomberg Businessweek's Max Chafkin, always good to have you here. Now, Bloomberg Tech's Marie Mawad decided it was time for a road trip across Europe. Being a resident of Paris, she's not blind to the idea of electric cars, so she decided to make a 715-mile battery-powered voyage in none other than a Tesla.
Recently, I went on a very special kind of road trip, my first road trip with a full electric vehicle. Now, I'm used to driving an electric car around the city of Paris, where I've lived for years, and there's been a car sharing scheme here of electric vehicles. But driving hundreds of miles outside the city is definitely something I'm not familiar with. And so what I did is I rented a Tesla, and I drove from Paris to Mannheim in Germany, which is the home and the birthplace of the automobile. Now, when you ask most consumers, they'll tell you what they're most worried about is running out of gas and not finding anywhere to plug in. Now, in this case, it's not running out of gas, it's running out of battery juice and finding somewhere to recharge the car. And that's actually a lot of the anxiety that I ran into during my trip. A lot of the difficulty in planning the trip was that I couldn't just fill up the tank and keep driving to wherever I wanted to go. In most cases, I had to plan my trip around where charging stations were and where I knew I would be able to stop alongside the highway or at hotels to refill my car. Now, when you ask people, this is what they're anxious about, and most of that is something you'll run into in reality, i.e. it's hard to plan whether a charging station is going to be available, whether it actually exists in some cases, whether it's a fast or slow charging station. And until that infrastructure evolves, then the adoption of electric cars will keep people nervous about heading out longer distances. And that's definitely true from what I found out. Marie Mawad in Paris for Bloomberg.
What a fun trip. That does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. We are, of course, live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology and follow our global breaking news network, TikTok, on Twitter. This is Bloomberg.